Again, so this is the course unit 4, the investigative procedures and techniques. So, sa investigative procedures and techniques, what are we going to do is how, diba? How do we conduct the how we come up into a proper investigation. So, yun nga yung activity ko sa inyo, diba? Why is it important to have a proper procedures? So, for today, malalaman natin ano yung mga different steps, diba? That we should take consecutively, diba? For us to have a successful operation or successful investigation. So, crime scene processing. So, what is crime scene processing? So, the purpose of processing the crime scene is to collect as much information and evidence as possible. So, kaya tayo nagkakandak ng crime scene processing para makolect natin lahat ng ebidensyang kailangan natin in as pristine in a condition as possible. So, this evidence will serve to develop conclusions regarding how the crime transpired, who was involved, and perhaps the why of the crime. If you could remember last week, diba? Dapat as an investigator, the cardinal points of investigation, we answered the what? So, what we called what? Ano dapat yung sinasagot natin? Angelica, you're trying to say? Yes, ano yun?
Po?
Na-open mo yung mic mo? So, ano yung sinasabi natin or ano yung sinasagot natin kapag crime scene processing? It is the cardinal points of 5 W's and 1 H.
1 H.
Okay. So, crime scene processing. Successful crime scene processing begins with the initial officer on the scene. Diba? Sino yung initial officer natin? Yung first responder. So, sabi niya, evidence that seems so trivial at first will prove vital in solving a crime. Kaya nga, diba, discuss natin ano dapat ba yung ginagawa ng first responder. Miss Galicia, okay, for your information, diba, magkakaroon ka na ng examinations niyan. So, therefore, in order for you to catch up for our discussion, you can watch all the recorded discussion po doon. From course unit 2. Mag-start ka ng course unit 2. Okay po?
Opo.
Next, crime scene processing. So, it is a processing of a crime scene, including the application of diligent and careful methods by an investigator, diba? Policemen to recognize, identify, preserve, and collect fact and items of evidentiary value that may assist in reconstructing that which actually occurred. So, that is crime scene processing, di ba? Ang purpose of having a crime scene processing, it was in order for the investigator to come up or to get all the evidences that will point or that will link to the offender. So, the crime scene is the area surrounding the place. Ano yung crime scene? Kung saan nangyari ang crime. Okay, crime scene refers to the place or where is the location where crime happened. That is crime scene. So, the processing of the area at the scene includes all direct traces of the crime. And this is determined by the type of crime committed and the place where the act occurred. Po. Siyempre, kung saan man nangyari yung crime scene, di ba po? Therefore, nandun yung mga evidences na kailangan natin to trace, di ba? Or to locate where is the offender. Or kung paano din nangyari yung isang crime. So, crime scene processing activities. Ito, these are the basic crime scene processing activities. Number 1 is assessing the scene o parang tinitingnan mo ano ba yung ina-assess mo muna. Number 2, observing. Number 3, documenting. Number 4, searching. Number 5, collecting. And number 6 is processing. So, yan po yung basic crime scene processing activities natin. Sunod-sunod po yan. Hindi po pwedeng magkabali-baliktad. So, basic crime scene processing activities. Assessing the scene. Okay? Pag sinabi natin assess, ibig sabihin parang i-assess mo muna yung situation. Tingnan mo muna. Ano sa palagay mo, 'di ba? Ganoon ang nag-a-assess eh. Ano sa tingin mo nangyari? Gaano kalala, 'di ba? Gaano ka severe? So, assessing the scene, ano bang ginagawa nito? Before any action, 'di ba? Before any action can be taken at the scene, the crime scene technician must assess the circumstances in order to decide on a proper course of action. If you could remember, 'di ba? sa ating discussion last week, sinabi ko, yung ating chief investigator, ang ginagawa niya, di ba, magkakaroon muna siya ng initial walkthrough. Tama po, di ba? Initial walkthrough. Anong ibig sabihin ng initial walkthrough niya? Wherein wala pang mangyayari nun. Ibig sabihin, ina-assess pa lang niya. From that initial walkthrough niya as a team leader, ang ginagawa niya is parang tinitingnan niya muna gaano kalala or anong possible na crime na nangyari and what would be, 'di ba? Ano kaya yung pinakamagandang technique na gagawin nila. So kaya yun muna yung ginagawa niya, ina-assess muna before they will decide what on proper action to be made. So that is assessing the scene. So assessing the scene, assessment begins with the processing task. Ayan. And defines what procedures will be employed. Siyempre, titingnan mo, ano kaya, ano ba kalala to? So, siguro, pwede na yung spiral method, siguro, double grid method. Kasi alam nyo, marami tayong different types of crime scene processing eh. So, kailangan, bago tayo mag-decide doon, kailangan ang ginagawa natin is, i-assess muna. Especially, ang ginagawa nito yung mga team leader. So, assessing the scene, sabi niya, assessment is an ongoing process. Again, when we say assessment, is an ongoing process as well. So the technician continuously assess the situation and adjust the processing plan when necessary. So kapag ina-assess na yung situation, for example, baka hindi natin ito matapos today. So magkakaroon sila ng plan B niyan. So i-secure muna natin to and then tomorrow tutuloy natin. So that is assessment. So, basic crimes and activities, that is assessing the scene. Once the investigation team took over the scene, the true task of assessment begins. So, once the investigation team, ayan, nakita na nila na natapos na yung assess nila, or ibig sabihin, okay, ganito yung nangyari. So, bago pumasok yung investigation team, or kapag nakuha na ng investigation team yung pinaka-crime scene, kapag pwede talaga silang pumasok doon, okay, yung the true task of assessment begins. Diyan na magkakaroon ng partition of work. So, this assessment considers a number of logistical and technical aspect of scene processing kasi diyan mag-uumpisa ang lahat. Okay po? So, and these considerations will ultimately define the actions of the crime scene as well as identify additional resources that may be necessary. Also, the team must complete this assessment before initiating any direct scene. Sabi ko nga sa inyo, di man agad-agad kukuhanin or magko-collect ng evidence. Kailangan muna nilang i-assess yung scene. So, processing and after receiving a debriefing by the initial responding officer. So, the purpose of scene assessment and debriefing are the following. Ano siya? Number 1, the scope of the scene. Okay? Next, the scene integrity. Next naman, team and approach and composition. Then, the search method to be used. And personal protective measures. So, yan yung ating mga reason. Sabi ko nga, bakit natin i-assess ang scene or purpose? Siyempre, titingnan mo yung scope of the scene. Gaano ba kalawak, gaano kahirap. Scene integrity. Then, team approach and composition. Sino yung mga kailangan mo sa investigation team? Diba? Sino pa yung mga kailangan mo? Search method to be used. Anong klaseng crime scene na method ang gagamitin mo? Spiral, grid method ba? And syempre, yung mga personal protective measures mo. Anong gagamitin nyo? Mag-gloves kayo? Kailangan pa bang naka-boots? O kailangan pa bang naka-PPE? Diba? So, that is the purpose of assessing the crime scene. So, why is debriefing important? First of all, ano ibig sabihin ng debriefing? Can anyone? Anong ibig sabihin ng debriefing? Pag sinabi natin debriefing, kailangan mo muna silang sabihan kung anong gagawin nila. O kanwari sa team leader kayo, o kayo ganito gagawin natin sa report ikaw ang magre-report sa number 1, ikaw magre-report sa number 2, ikaw magre-report sa number 3. Ganun ang debriefing. Ngayon ang tanong, bakit kailangan ng debriefing? Or bakit importante ang debriefing? It is just a simple answer na para alam nyo ano ang gagawin nyo. Diba? So, debriefing is important to determine the following. Ito, scene scope and nature, changes to the scene, status of involved parties, and scene security. So, alam mo nang gagawin mo sa mga scene, sa crime scene natin. Kasi kung hindi natin alam ang debriefing, therefore, Baka yung isa, wala na pala sa mismong crime scene, nagko-collect pa siya ng evidence, di ba? Yung iba naman, wala na siya sa proper procedure. So that is the why debriefing is always important. So scene scope and nature. Ano ba 'yon? The scene scope and nature, so the initial officer should clearly define, diba, the scope of the scene, identifying specific boundaries and reason why areas were included or excluded in the initial perimeter. For example, lagay natin sa reporting nyo, bakit ganito kalami yung report natin, 1 to 5? Kasi ganito, ganyan, ganyan. Ito yung scope natin. So, one cause naman sa crime scene, scene scope and nature. So, as an initial officer, kailangan niyang i-debrief na, okay? So, magsimula dito sa kwarto hanggang sa sala. Ito po yung crime scene na merong nangyari yung krimen, diba? So, knowing the scope at saka yung nature. At tapos, parang meron kami nakitang struggle sa banda dito. So, yun ang scene, scope, and nature. One important, okay, why this debriefing is important is to know the scene and scope and scene, scope, and nature of a crime scene. Next, so the general impressions of the officers regarding the nature of the crime and specific observation that led those impressions should be sought and considered by the investigative team. Naiintindihan po ba? So, if the officers discovered specific items of evidence, this should be pointed out to the investigator. So, for example, di ba, inassess na. Tapos nakita niya na, meron po kasi ako nakitang kutsilyo doon, meron kaming nakitang murder weapon doon. So, therefore, yung mga initial points na nakita niya na possible na maging best evidence or physical evidence, sasabihin na niya. So, information regarding how the crime came to the attention to the officer, kailangan din niya sabihin. Paano niyo nalaman, diba? Sinong nagsabi? Yan. So, information regarding how the crime came to the attention of the officer and the specifics of what that information entailed should be sought. Sinong nag-report, anong oras niyo nalaman, lahat yan. So, again, why is debriefing important? Tapos na tayo kay scene, scope, and nature. Let's go now to the changes to the scene. So, ano ba yung changes to the scene? Pag sinabing changes to the scene, parang the initial officer should quickly highlight significant changes to the scene by the police, fire, or emergency medical service personnel. Bakit, ma'am? For example, okay, dun sa crime scene, buhay pa yung victim. Okay? So, merong, syempre, kapag pupunta ka ng crime scene na yun, pwede mo munang, anong unahin natin? Syempre, yung buhay ng isang tao. So, syempre, kapag ginalaw natin yung tao doon, or kung ano yung dinatnan niya, kung meron man silang ginalaw doon, especially yung tao, kailangan nating sabihin. Kasi syempre, nagkagulo na yung ating crime scene. Naggalaw siya diba? Kasi nga, pumasok yung medical team, pumasok yung ganito, kasi tutulungan yung victim. So, that is changes to the scene, original scene. Naiintindihan po ba? Paano nangyari yun? For example, tinawag siya, yung first officer, yung initial officer na yun, or parang first responder natin. Nakita niya na nakatihaya or nakadapa yung mismong victim. Tapos, nung pumasok siya, buhay pa pala. So, tumawag siya ng medical team. Anong nangyari? Pag dumating na yung medical team, pumasok din sila dun sa crime scene. So, therefore, may possibility nagalaw yung mga evidence doon, or tapos kinuha na nila yung, tapos isa pa doon, kinuha yung victim. So, what will happen? Diba? Nag-iba ba yung crime scene nun? Tanong, nag-iba? Yes, kasi kinuha na nga yung victim, tapos pumasok pa yung mga medical team. So, there is a possibility na may naggalaw sila doon. Okay po? So, kaya yun, changes to the scene. Kailangan din sabihin yun ng ating initial officer. Then, if items were moved, ayan lights turn on, yan, doors open, or bodies were moved, the investigator must know that these actions occurred. So, kapag i-brief na yan sa ating investigation team, kailangan alam yan ng mga investigator na ginalaw to. Okay? Kanina, nandito yung victim. Siyempre, kailangan mo sabihin yan. Next. The specific methods of entry by the police into the scene at any items that were inadvertently touched by the police or observed being touched or by others should be identified. So, kapag, siyempre, yung mga first responder natin, mga police or mga medical team, lahat man ng nagalaw nila doon, kailangan niyang sabihin. Okay po? So, another After ng scene scope, changes to the scene. Now, status of involved parties. So, why is debriefing important? Because of the status of involved parties. Ano yon? So, the status of victims, significant weaknesses, and any suspect should be made known to the investigator. So, kailangan din alam niya yung mga parties involved. Yung victim, nakita mo ba? Sino yung witness? Or yung mga potential offender or any suspect na nakita niya within the crime scene. So, live or near-death victims may have been transported. Ayan, kailangan niya sabihin yan, yung victim. So, suspect may have been detained or baka nahuli na ba yung suspect na nakikita nyo? Or individuals claiming to be witnesses may be present. So, lahat ng mga parties involved in that crime scene, okay, kailangan pong i-report yan or kailangan kasama sa debriefing. So, as a result, the investigators of the crime scene team may have to act immediately to evaluate if there is a physical evidence such as blood stain, di ba? Clothing, gunshot residue, and trace evidence if present on these individuals. Kanwari, yung mga blood stain, gunshot, trace evidence, lahat yan kailangan sabihin ulit kay investigator. Yung pong victim na dinala sa hospital, meron siyang gunshot residue dito. Yung pong witness na nakita ko kanina, isuot niya ang damit, puno ng dugo. So, lahat yun, kailangan mo sabihin yung mga involved parties. Kasi malay natin na isa sa pala sa kanila is yung offender. Again, so tapos na tayo dun scene scope, changes, status involved. Last one is the scene security. Okay. Why is debriefing important when it comes to scene security? The initial responding officer should describe the steps taken to secure the scene. Siyempre, di ba? Including those efforts the officers feels are necessary to enhance security. So, ikukwento niyo rin yan. Nung karating ko dito, ang ginawa ko is naglagay na ako ng harang para wala na agad makapasok. Ayan. Diba? Any crime scene entry logs created by the initial responder should be identified. Tapos po, nung karating ko dito, bigla na rin pong pumasok si kapitan, ganyan. Bigla na rin po pumasok si officer, ganyan. Okay? So, lahat ng the initial responder should be identified, collected, and attached to the crime scene team's entry and exit log. Diba, I told you, once na nagkaroon na yun ng crime scene do not cross or any man or any barricade around the crime scene, therefore, nagkakaroon na tayo ng exit and entry log. Kasi nga, dapat alam natin kung sino yung pumasok at lumabas dyan. Kasi kung meron mang nasirang evidence or kung meron bang nawawalang evidence, may possibility na sa kanila yan. So, scene security. If a specific scene integrity threat, okay. For example, someone who has already demonstrated an attempt to violate the perimeter. Yan. So, exists in the nature of a relative or media representative, the initial responding officer should ensure the investigative team is aware of this threat. So, minsan kasi alam nyo, kung nanonood kayo ng yung mga crime scene na crime scene series, di ba, sometimes, okay, merong mga nagpapanggap na investigator sila or kasama sila ng mga investigation team. Tapos, bakit kailangan yon, ma'am? Ha? Kasi baka nga, yung mga yan is, tawag dito, nagva-violate sila na makapasok sila doon or nagpupumilit silang pumasok sa crime scene just to get the evidence that they take na mag-link or magpo-point out doon sa ating offender. Okay? So, di ba may mga parameters nga tayo. So, kung sino man ang mag-violate nun, kailangan yon sa scene security. So, yung anumang threat, anumang pose of threat or imminent danger doon, kailangan alam yun ng ating mga investigation team. So, again, that is the basic crime scene processing activities within the assessing the scene. Assessing the scene pa lang tayo, ha. Nasa step 1 pa lang po tayo. May tanong po kayo? Do you have any questions po before we continue in that observing? So, wala naman. Observing na yan tayo. Number 2, observing. So, what is observing ba? So, the most basic aspect of crime scene processing is observation. So, looking and mentally registering the condition of the scene and artifacts found in the scene. So, parang i-observe mo na. Parang nangyayari dito, parang, diba, bomb explosion. So, parang ino-observe mo na agad, merong splatter ng blood dito, therefore, baka may forced entry. Naggulo yung mga unan dito, therefore, baka nagkaroon muna ng pag-aaway, sabi mo. So, that is observing. Quite often, observation, diba, is conducted in conjunction with specific search efforts. So, to observe, the technician must move about the scene, which in and of itself presents opportunities of adding, moving, or damaging evidence. So, that is observing lang. Okay na tayo? Next naman, ayan na. Ito yung pinaka-importante sa lahat. Documenting the scene. So, what is documenting the scene? Documentation entails a variety efforts, okay? Which include written documentation of the technicians, observations, photographing, and videotaping of the scene, and creation of the sketches. Yung mga documentation, ito na yung ire-record na lahat ng sa crime scene. Kasi nga, di ba, bago tayo mag-collect ng ating mga evidences, we need to record everything. So, kung magkakaroon man tayo ng physical reconstruction, parang reconstruction of the crime scene, kahit naalis na dyan sa tamang lugar yung mga evidences, meron tayong matitirang documentation. So, alam natin, ganito kasi namin nakita yan. So, kailangan i-document yan. Kasi if we will just rely on what we have seen, diba, in the eyes, maraming possibilities na makalimutan natin yung details, diba? Napakaraming details. Kahit nga alikabok, minsan dino-document nila yan. So, documentation of observation always precedes detailed. Ito na yung photography, diba? And then, photography always precedes with sketching and measuring. And then, close-up photography, special techniques such as road mapping are always and the last actions taken. If you could remember, sabi ko nga sa inyo, kapag sa forensic photography, okay, yung photographer yung unang-unang na pumapasok para lang ma-record. For example, papasok na investigation team, bago sila hawakan or bago nila galawin, bago sila umikot, ang gagawin muna ni photographer is i-record niya muna lahat. So, ito yung harap, ito yung sa dadaanan nila. So, lagi na una si photographer. So, it is through documentation that the technician backs up, ayan, sinasabi ko nga, backs up claims regarding the original condition and context of the scene. Wait lang ha, wait. Wait lang, okay. Okay, let's continue. So, documenting the scene. So, it is through documentation that the technician backs up claims regarding the original condition and context of the scene. So, kailangan yan i-record. Kasi kung hindi yan i-record or hindi yan i-document, therefore, sabi ko nga sa inyo, if we will just rely on what we have seen, diba? Hindi yan magiging reliable. Kasi, maaring may makalimutan kang details and also wala tayong ipapakitang evidence sa court. So, methods of documentation. So, documentation has 4 key elements. Ano yon? Notes, ayan, note-taking, photography and video, sketches, and reports. Again, documentation has 4 key elements. Number 1 is note, diba? Note-taking, if you could remember, as an investigator, lagi silang may tickled notebook, diba? Photography, or sometimes video, sabi nga natin, photography or video is the best, it is the proper way or the best way of preserving the evidences. Then, sketches, to locate naman yung proper or yung mga, to detailed out the, tawag dito, lalo na yung mga location of, sa crime scene. So, yung mga proper location nila with measurements. Then, reports. Okay? So, 4 key elements. Number 1 is notes. What is notes ba? So, the crime scene technician's notes should begin with the notification of the crime. So, identify specific actions upon arrival and provide a clear and detailed record of all observation and actions taken while in the scene. So, yung notes na yan, lahat ng, for example, di ba, kapag nag-debriefing sila, bago mag-debrief yan, lahat ng nakita niya as a responding officer, di ba, susulat niya lahat. So, therefore, lahat ng na-observe niya, lahat ng na-assess niya is ibibigay niya sa investigation team. Therefore, okay, magagamit nila yon as a reliable source na, okay, ito lahat ng nangyari. So, that is a notes. So, all notes should be accurately reflect action and effort. So, but when describing the scene in these two specific steps, it is imperative that the notes be detailed and concise. So, dapat yung mga notes mo, detailed dyan and concise. So, yan. Meron nga silang crime scene security log. So, notes yan. So, it is a chronological account of the responding officers' observations and activity of the scene. So, ano bang nakita mo ng gantong oras? Sinong pumasok ng gantong oras? Ayan, anong kinuha nila ng gantong oras? So, that is a crime scene security log. Okay po? Okay na tayo kay notes? Nakakasunod ba kayo? Hi. Are you still there?
Yes po, ma'am.
Okay. Sigurado kayo ha, kasi alam nyo ba na ang exam nyo napakahirap? Do you have idea for examination?
Wala pa po, ma'am.
Okay, after netong aking discussion, if matapos man natin, okay, i-discuss ko sa inyo kung gaano kahirap ang yung examination. Okay, so next naman is photography and video. So, photography or video. Crime scene photographs are intended to lead the viewer of the photographs through the scene from an overall perspective right up to the details of specific items of evidence. Okay po? So, photography or video, sabi nga niya, parang from overall perspective, sabi nga niya, magsimula sa labas, ang photographer natin, kukuhanan na yan. So, iti-take na niya ng pictures yan as a record. I-record na niya. Magsimula pa rin sa labas, magsimula sa daan, sa highway. Kung paano. Kasi as a photographer, ang ginagawa mo is to establish the location. Okay? O, isa doon yung tinatawag nating overlapping photography. Yung overlapping na yon, so for example sa Fatima, kailangan mong picturean yan. Papunta doon, kung ano yung way papunta sa Fatima, ano doon yung way papunta doon sa kabila. So, photography or video. Photography serves to highlight, ayan, di ba? Highlight and make understandable the crime scene report. So, even without the report, someone's viewing the crime scene photograph should comprehend significant details and aspects of the scene. So, sometimes kasi itong ating photographer video, di ba, kahit wala yung report, yung summary report or final report na yan, through photography or video, sabi nga natin, a pictures speaks 1,000 words. Diba? Isang picture can speak 1,000 words. Kasi you can detail out, diba, na anong nakikita mo sa picture na yan. Okay po? So, it is a visual storytelling, sabi nga nila. That, and as such, the photograph should be fair and accurate representation of the scene which the story is being told. So, photography video, types and purposes of crime scene photographs. So, we have different types of photographs po. Hindi lang siya minsanan, ano? So, now, overall photograph, mid-range photograph, and close-range photograph. Again, we have three: overall, mid-range, and close-range photograph. These are the three types of photography. Meron pa yan yung close-up. So, pero yung basic niyang tatlo is overall, mid-range, and close-range photograph. Don't worry, itong photography na to, meron naman kayo subject na forensic photography. So, you could learn talaga doon yung lahat ng different tawag dito, methods on how we can document the crime scene using photography. So, overall photograph. What is the overall photograph? Overall photograph, the purpose of overall photograph is to depict the general condition and layout of the scene. So, overall photograph, ito. So, for example, kwarto to, ayan yung crime scene. Pag sinabing overall photograph, kailangan makuha mo yan ng buo. Overall, wala kang ini-exclude. Tignan nyo yung crime scene dito. So, tignan nyo, kuhang-kuha siya ng picture na yan. Yan ang ating overall photograph. It means, lahat ng details nandyan, involved siya. Walang labis, walang kulang. So, it is to show exactly where the scene was. Yun ang purpose ng overall photograph. It is to show exactly where the scene was, kung saan nangyari yung crime scene na yan. To to the exclusion of any other location and to show all boundaries of the scene. Kaya kung naalala nyo, sabi ko kung kanwari establish natin ng location na ang crime scene ay sa Fatima, therefore, picture mo yung sa pinakaharap ng Fatima, also pati rin yung daan, yung papunta sa Fatima, left and right man yun. Hindi natatapos doon ng overall photograph, okay? Overall photograph, pwede rin siya sa mismo, kunwari, di ba, sa Fatima yan, tapos merong specific na kwarto. Yung specific na kwarto na yun, o room, pipicturean yan sa taas. So, therefore, yun yung ating magiging basehan na yun talaga ang pinaka-crime scene. Okay po? So, overall photographs are exposed so they overlap each other. If you could remember, sabi ko nga, di ba? Nag-overlap sila para lang makita yung buong location. So, a typical procedure is to go to the corners of a room and take a photograph in each one looking to the opposite corner. So, minsan, nakikita niyo ba to? You can see this, mga nakalagay na green, violet, white, and red. So, therefore, dito nakakuha, ito si photographer, pipicturean niya mula dito sa view na to, pipicturean niya mula sa view na to, dito rin, at saka dito. Nakita niyo po ba? Nakikita niyo ba yung mouse ko? Hindi, no?
Hindi po, ma'am.
Wait lang.
Hindi po, ma'am.
Wait, pointer. Ayan, kita niyo na?
Yes.
Wala po.
Ayan. So, ito, ayan. Ito, pumupunta sila dito rin, at saka ito, tsaka yan. Ibig sabihin niya yung four corners kung saan kukuhanan niya yung crime scene. Para mag-overall or para overlap, para makuha lang. Kasi di ba kung kanwari four corners yan, kung kukuhanin mo lang sa isang corner dito, hindi naman makukuha ang buo yan. So, in order for them to get the overall photograph of the crime scene location, ang gagawin nila, ayan, kailangan pupunta siya dito, tsaka dito. Okay po ba tayo dyan? Nakasunod kayo, Kaya pa ba? Next.
Po.
So, overall photographs are taken in two distinct iterations during crime scene processing. So, the first occurs prior to the introduction of any scales, photo, placards, or the like. So, ang overall photograph again, ang purpose niya is to establish the location of the crime scene and to get the overall view of the crime scene. Exterior overall photograph. Tignan nyo Exterior overall photographs related the crime scene to the general surrounding area. For example, ito yung crime scene. Pati yung daan doon, kung paano pumunta dito sa crime scene na yan, pipicturean nila. Tignan nyo. So, exterior overall photograph, if the crime was committed indoors, overall photographs also show the external views of the building. Yun nga yung sinasabi ko na kung indoor siya sa loob ng room ng isang Fatima, yung sa labas ng Fatima, yung daan papunta sa Fatima, pipicturean din po yun. Okay? Pati yung hanggang sa makapunta sila sa mismong room, kung saan ilang hagdan yung dinaanan nila, pipicturean po yun. So, it will be the job of the crime scene photographer or tinatawag nating forensic photographer nowadays to walk the viewer of the photographs into the crime scene from its outer perimeter. So, sabi ko nga sa inyo, as a photographer, pipicturean mo yan sa labas kung paano pumunta ng Fatima. Pagpunta mo ng gate, pagpunta mo ng lobby, hanggang sa umakyat ka ng, tawag dito, stairs. Lahat yan, pipicturean overall hanggang sa makapunta ka doon sa mismong specific na kwarto para tutukuyin yung pinaka-location ng crime scene. So, parang through that picture, syempre, parang kinukwento niya. Hindi nga lang siya video, di ba? It is just a photo. But because of that pictures, nakita mo kung paano yung way makapunta doon sa mismong crime scene. Okay ba tayo doon? So, it will be the job of the crime scene photographer to walk the viewer of the photographs into the crime scene from its outer perimeter. So, next naman, how about interior? Interior overall. So, interior overall photographs are the bridge between the exterior overall. So, photographs and the individual items of evidence within the crime scene. After the exterior has been photographed, and before the evidence is photographed, the interior is photographed. So, after nun, di ba, nakapunta na siya sa mismong location, yung pinaka-crime scene na, yung ating interior sa loob. Di ba? Yung mismong room, yun na yung gagawin niya. Okay po? So, photography and video, types and purposes of crime scene. Okay na tayo kay overall. Again, when say overall photograph, the purpose of this is to What? Establish location. Okay po? Establish location of the crime scene. That is the purpose of overall photograph. How about mid-range photograph? Ano ba ang purpose ng mid-range photograph? So, when we say mid-range photograph, it is the evidence establishing photographs. Ibig sabihin, ang ini-establish namin sa mid-range is the evidence itself na meron sa mismong crime scene. Again, sa pag sinabi nating mid-range photographs, okay, these are the evidence establishing photographs. Ang ini-establish dito is the evidence. Okay. So, mid-range photograph, evidence establishing photographs. Ayan, these are just example. The purpose of evidence establishing photograph is to frame the item in conjunction with some obvious landmark. So, kung ano yung pinaka sa tingin niyang malapit. For example, nakita siya ng scissors. Yung scissors na yan, saan siya malapit? Ito, may mga sa gantong pile, ganyan. So, it is some obvious landmark evident in overall photographs. Okay tayo doon kay mid-range. So, for example, one way of establishing mid-range photograph, for example, ito yung body. Wala kasi siya dyan eh. Merong body and then sa body na yon yung ating victim, merong sa gilid niya weapon na gun. Tapos dito may basong basag. Tapos dito merong gunting. So, kapag pinicturean natin yung scene na yun, na yung, ito yung victim body or yung ating cadaver, tapos with scissors, with blood, with glass broken or broken glass, therefore, okay, ang tawag doon ay mid-range photograph kasi parang nililink natin yung mga gaano kalayo yung ating mga evidences sa isa't isa. So, that is mid-range photograph. Sabi nga niya, it is an evidence photograph. Intindihan po. Next, close-range photograph. Ano naman ang close-range po? Ito. Also referred as the forensic quality photograph. Ito naman, pag sinabing close-range, talagang titingnan na yung pinaka-evidence and then imi-measure na nila. Ayan. So, titingnan gaano kalaki yung mismong evidence. So, it is to fill the frame with the evidence. So, ang kukuhanan mo lang dito, yung mismong, tawag dito, ang kukuhanan mo lang dito is yung mismong physical evidence. Nagigets niyo po ba ako?
Yes po.
Naman. So, pag, kanwari, ang close range photograph, ito talaga yung mismong, tawag dito, isang evidence lang. Okay? Yun lang ang frame niya. So, close range photograph, ito natawag natin in situ. So, the object is photographed as found in the scene with no alteration or movement. Ibig sabihin, yun talaga ang, place niya, in situ. Okay? No alteration or movement has been made. So, the purpose is to allow the viewer to see the details in the evidences. Yun po ang dahilan kung bakit kailangan ng close-range photograph para makita natin yung detalyado, ano ba yung mayroon sa evidence na yun. Okay na tayo doon sa photograph and photographs, yung from close range, mid-range, and close-up. Okay tayo doon?
Yes.
Yes po, ma'am. Yes po.
Pag sinabing, kunwari, ito. Again, kapag sinabing close, magsimula tayo sa pinakauna. Ano kasing pinakauna? Sige nga.
Overall.
Overall. Ibig sabihin,
Overall.
yan ang i-establish
Location.
mo dito. Location. Kapag naman sa mid-range,
Evidences.
evidences, kung paano yung location ng evidences with the specific, parang remarkable place, di ba? Sabi ko nga
Yes,
kanina,
ma'am.
explain ko kung meron siya, kung ano yung katabi niya. We are,
Yes,
parang
ma'am.
location. How about close-up?
Close range po.
Close-up or
Close
close
range.
range. Ibig sabihin, ano pinapakita dito?
Measurement po.
Physical evidence.
Physical
Evidences
evidence
itself.
lang. Okay? Yung mga details dun sa mismong physical evidences such as measurements, okay? Diba? And kung ano yung itsura niya. Okay tayo doon? Okay na tayo kay photograph. Next naman is sketches. So, what is sketches naman? So, So, this serves as a graphic document to show the layout, orientation, and interrelationship of the scenes and the evidence. So, ito yung crime scene sketch. Okay? Crime scene sketch is a permanent record of the size. Sabi ko nga sa inyo, kapag gagamitin natin yung sketches, we need to, ang ini-establish natin dito is yung ating size and distance. Kasi kung picture lang yan, hindi naman na, di ba sa picture lumiliit? Therefore, hindi naman natin makita yung actual size niya. So, ang purpose ng sketches is to establish the actual size of the crime scene. So, it is a permanent record of the size and distance relationship of the crime scene and physical evidence within it. Okay po. So, we have different types of sketch. We have bird's eye view, cross projection, elevation view, and 3D view. So, meron ba kayong idea kung ano yung mga different types of sketch na yan? Bird's eye view. Pag sinabing bird's eye view, ayan yan. From sa taas, from bird's eye, parang mata ng agila. Diba? So, ibig sabihin, mag-i-sketch ka kung ano yung nakikita mo from the top. Okay po? Ganun ang bird's eye view. So, bird's eye view, only horizontal surfaces are evident. Yan, kung ano lang nakikita mo sa taas from the top. And typically, only evidence on surfaces is included in the sketch. So, therefore, kung kanwari, kwarto yan, yung mismong ano lang, yung 4 corners lang na yan, di ba? Wala nang iba. Kung ano lang nakita mo from the top, that is bird's eye view. Okay? So, the most common form of crime scene sketching. So, madalas, yan ang ginagawa nilang crime scene sketch is yung bird's eye view. Di ba? Square lang naman. Sabihin, kung ito yung kwarto, yung from the top view, okay, yun lang ang dinodrawing nila. So, most common yan. Yes, ano yan, anak?
Ma'am, paano po nila ini-sketch yan? True picture po ba?
Hindi, actual.
Okay po. Thank you po.
Yan, kasi kailangan nilang establish yung location, anak, at saka yung, kaya di ba nagsusukat-sukat sila? Kasi kung picture lang nila i-drawing yan, walang mangyayari. I mean, yung hindi nila makita yung actual size. Sabi ko nga, di ba, kapag sa photograph, di ba, ang liit lang ng photograph, pero hindi naman natin ma-establish yung actual size. Ang purpose kasi ng sketches is to provide the actual measurements or sizes.
Thank you po.
Okay? So, it is prepared with the perspective being as though the author was looking down upon the scene from above. Sabi ko nga, from top view. Parang yung nag-i-sketch kung kanwari sa isang kwarto, nasa bubong siya, ganyan. Or parang nasa pinakataas ng pader, ganun. Pero hindi naman literal na ganun. Okay po? So, this type shows the floor layout but cannot represent the heights of items or show associated evidence on the wall. So, kasi kapag bird's eye view, hindi niya makikita yung height, diba? Kung gaano kataas. Ang makita lang niya is yung mismong sa kung kunwari, sofa, ayan. Hindi naman niya papakita dyan kung gaano kataas ang sofa. Pero pwede niyang ipakita dyan kung gaano ka-wide ang sofa. Naiintindihan niyo po ba ako?
Yes
Kunwari,
po.
may TV dito, hindi naman niya masasabi sa sketch niya na kung gaano kataas ang sketch. Pero makita niya kung gaano ka-wide. Diba? Ganun lang ang ginagawa ng ating bird's eye view. So, this type shows floor layout but cannot represent the heights. Floor layout lang po, di ba? So, of items or showed associated evidence on the walls. So, ano po bang gagawin kapag meron kayang evidence sa wall? Anong magandang gamitin? Ito na yung maganda, yung, ba't wala siyang cross projection? Tingnan natin. Ito. Mamaya pala yung cross projection niya. So, ito muna, elevation view muna tayo, okay? Kasi yung isa sa magandang pakita yung evidence sa wall is yung cross projection. Elevation view. So, what is elevation view? So, it is drawn, ayan, depicting the side view of some portion of the scene. For example, ito, some portion. So, typically, an interior wall or similar vertical structure. Okay? Kapag elevation view, hindi siya from the top. From pa-side siya. Okay po? Sabi niya, a side view, depicting a side view. So, it can be used to map and document evidence such as defects, stains, or other evidence on walls or other surfaces. For example, dun sa isang, gumamit ka ng bird's eye view sketch, and then dun sa isang wall, nakita mo na marang blood spatter, then therefore, pwede mong gamitin itong elevation view. So, this can also be used to draw an extended exterior scene, sabi nga niya. So, depicting in side view the orientation of various buildings and the like. So, this might be a functional approach when trying to depict a bullet trajectory. So, magandang ginagamit ang elevation view. Usually, kapag daan ng isang bullet or trajectory ng isang bullet. So, sa tingin niya saan mismo nanggaling or naglakbay yung isang bullet. So, after ng elevation view, it is the cross projection view. Ito yung sinasabi ko kanina. Na kanwari sa wall. Kapag dyan, ayan, tignan, para siyang cross projection or excluded view. Para siyang box. Tignan nyo kung tingnan nyo, di ba? Ito yung kung ito lang yung box na titingnan natin, therefore, ito anong tawag sa sketch na yan kung ito lang? That is?
Bird's eye view po.
Bird's eye view. Ngayon, kung dadagdag natin with the walls, ayan, that is cross projection or exploded view. Yan na yung makikita mo pati height. Pwede mo nang sabihin, di ba? Kasi nga, ginamit mo na pati yung wall. So, para siyang box. So, this combines the standard bird's eye view of the horizontal surfaces of the room while at the same time, di ba, laying down a wall or walls in order to depict evidence that is present on these virtual surfaces, lalo na sa mga splatter ng blood, di ba? Ayan. Okay po. So, this allows the viewer to see the orientation and interrelationship of items of evidence on both vertical and horizontal. So, kapag ito kasi horizontal lang, pero kapag dahil pati sa exploded or sa cross projection, therefore, na-establish natin pati yung height ng isang object. So, the sketch creator can lay down a single wall, diba? Multiple walls, or any combination that seems appropriate. Okay na tayo doon. Bird's eye view, cross projection, elevation view, and the last one is the 3D
3D.
view. Ayan, paano naman yung mga 3D? Ayan, ganyan yung 3D. Diba? This offers an ability to present the crime scene information in a more realistic perspective. Okay? More realistic yan, pero napakahirap ng i-drawing yan. Kasi kapag 3D, di ba, meron siyang 45 degree. Alam niyo ba, kapag 3D, di ba, when we are meron kayong drafting na, subject, nung high school kayo, di ba, meron?
Yes po.
Di ba, meron, in order for us to draw a 3D or 2D view of an object, meron siyang 45 degree or 90 degree na ganyan, di ba? Para makita natin kapag nagdo-drawing tayo. So, ganun. Kapag 3D ang ginagamit natin, it is more realistic in perspective. Parang yung nakikita natin in actual. Di ba? Kapag ganyan ang nakita natin, yan, di ba? Parang alam mo na yung location niya mismo. Okay po. Pero siguro, madalang lang naman sila gumamit itong 3D view na to kasi mahirap din siyang gawin. Okay po? So, next. Okay na tayo kay, yung mga documenting evidences natin. Diba? Ngayon, so, punta na tayo sa crime scene search. Kaya pa ba? Alas 12 na eh. O, tuloy na lang natin to tomorrow. I think we should, tuloy na lang tomorrow. Sa tingin
Ma'am, nasa module yan.
Yes, naka-upload po ito. Ituloy na lang natin ito kasi mahaba-haba to. Baka mabitin tayo.
Sabi mo lang dito 19.
Yes. Okay po.
Sige po.
Ituloy na lang natin to tomorrow. So, this is the part 1 of our course, Unit 4.